frais comme des fleurs. La nuit fut brève, hélas, pourquoi sitôt fermer nos cœurs à l'appel du bonheur? L'ombre s'enfuit, ma lèvre hésite à murmurer après de nos aveux des mots d'adieu. Le soleil paraît trop vite, faut-il donc que l'on se quitte? Que m'importe à moi la balle du temps? Je voudrais tant retarder l'aurore et t'aimer encore. S'enfuit, tout n'est que songe et tu n'es plus malgré tous nos désirs qu'un souvenir. Si l'amour n'est que mensonge au parfum triste qui ronge, s'il est vrai qu'à moi
So, as you can tell, this is not a typical event. Like I said, Paul didn't want to shadow. He wanted a chance for the people that he knew and cared for to come and get together, have a glass of wine, have some food, and socialize. This was definitely one of his favorite activities and something that he very much loved to do. So, let's keep that in the spirit. I'm also going to be somewhat brief. Paul's a modest man, father. He would be, I think, embarrassed by a little bit too much carrying on. So, just kind of give you an idea of how he was. But even during his last weeks, he was more concerned about the people around him rather than us. Anytime any of us would help him with anything, he was always making sure to thank us for taking care of him. It's like he forgot that, he spent the last 50 years taking care of us. And but really, what can you say about a man who immigrated from a war-torn country with basically nothing, barely able to speak English? All he had was his intelligence, his integrity, his work ethic, and the fact that he married well. But in short order, he managed to carve out a slice of the American dream. It wasn't too long before he had gone through school, made some decisions, opened up his own business, learned his trade, convinced people that he knew a lot about decorating when he really just had a French accent. And I don't know how many of you know, but in his 40s, he decided to sell this successful business, pack up his family, and move to a tropical island because he went on vacation. So to say that he was an impulsive risk taker who had confidence in life, I think would be a bit of an understatement. So I want to tell you a little bit about, obviously you guys move in a different way than I did, but as a father. When we were in Tahiti, I was 8 years old, and I became a little bit homesick. Even though it was a paradise, and I had lots of friends there and everything else, there were certain things that I missed. One of those being apples. Even though we were on a tropical island with tons of fresh mangoes, papayas, grapefruit, coconut. Of course, what does the kid want? His apples. So I used to eat the apples core, seed, all of it. So I had my birthday while we were in Tahiti, and he actually went, and we were on a smaller island. He drove across the island, got on a single prop plane, fly to the big island, which he didn't enjoy because it always made him motion sick. Spent all day looking on the they got out to eat for presents. Spent so long, they actually had to stay the night there, couldn't return the same day. Came back, and one of the other things you should know is that where we lived, none of the Tahitian kids who were our friends had any money. They were living off the land, they were fishing for their meals. The only thing we did was barter for stuff. And one of the things that we bartered for were marbles. And you couldn't get marbles on this little island, and any marbles that I managed to collect were quickly lost to better players. So on my birthday, in walks my father after being gone for almost 2 days, and he's got with him the biggest bag of marbles I have still ever seen, and a whole big bag of apples. And suddenly I was just the happiest kid and the richest kid. And so that's just kind of the man that my father was. He's a man who sacrificed, spoiled his children. We never wanted for anything, or anything reasonable. He's a man of integrity, who never forfeit his morals, or take the easy way out. And he instilled that in us. He instilled a core value system that he believed. And he was a man who kept promises, honored commitment. His wisdom and his humility, his selflessness, and particular strength when facing adversity. He set an example for all of us. We worked tirelessly, day and night sometimes, but we needed to get a store, coming home, doing upholstery in the garage, and in order to raise us to be strong, moral, and self-sufficient people. I think that's the greatest gift that any man can give his children. So I also know that my father would not want anyone to shed tears, so I'm going to hold him back here over his passage, but feel happiness in having known him. From everybody that's come up to me today, I can certainly see that he's affected and touched a lot. So this assembly is such a remarkable group of friends joining us in paying respects to my father. Says much more about his accomplishments as a human being than I could ever hope to express in words. I know that all of you knew my father in ways that I didn't, and I certainly would love to provide this opportunity for anyone that wishes to speak about him, tell a story, reminisce, or just propose a toast. We can do that. Thank you again for coming.
Like, we'll miss you because we won't have any Republicans to pick on. Just a quick thing.
Had a very wide range of interests, a very, very wide range of interests. Almost everything. He was interested in almost everything. And the only thing, to my knowledge, that he didn't have an interest in was religion. I never heard him say a good word about religion. Mostly he didn't discuss it. But the way our Tuesday group works is that people would gather here in Ryford Center here, the community
La Jolla
center.
Community.
La Jolla Community Center. 8 or 10 or 12 of us would sit around the table and talk about politics and movies, the opera, the weather, whatever. And when we sort of ran out of steam, then Paul would open up his notebook and he would pull out of it some article, or 1 or 2 articles, each of them 3 or 4 or 5 pages long. And we would go around the table and each person would read a paragraph, and that's how this thing went. The process of distributing, of getting everybody a copy of this is a story in its own right, which I'm not going to tell, but it was a miracle each time that it came out that all the papers were distributed. But but I have saved a number of those articles, waiting for until I learned enough French to be able to really understand the articles. They were very interesting. But I have a collection of those things, and you know, I pulled out about 15 of them, which means it would be like about 3 months worth of articles, just to see what the scope of his interests were, because Paul, of course, picked all the articles, and so what I did was try to, in order to understand the scope of this thing, I put them together And I want to share it with you. It isn't particularly, not, I don't know, not that funny, but this is what Paul had picked out. It's representative of the scope of his interests. About half of them were histories of one kind or another. And of those, first of all, they were biographies. And in the group of 15 I picked out, I just did this at random, there was a biography of Margaret Thatcher, of Georges Clemenceau of France, and Maximilian I of Mexico. Paul had an interest in Mexico, but we'll get into that. But you can see these are mostly B-level people, not first-ranked political figures. And that's part of the charm of it, that the history, the people that he chose were interesting, but not necessarily the A-level people.
Excuse me, Margaret Thatcher was A-level.
Yeah.
But 2/3 of them, thank you for, this happens to be my wife, but this was not a setup, but this was that this was, Margaret Thatcher remains A-level, but is sinking fast. And anyway, the others, and that's part of Paul's charm, is to have picked that out. All right, then there were actual histories, but always offbeat. Things like the history of the Olympics, or the history of winemaking, or the history of overweight people. Now that took, for a guy like Paul, who was always slim, I guess his whole life, now that you see these pictures, to have picked out, and as I recall, the article was very long, and the article about overweight people, and it took a certain je ne sais quoi, is the right phrase to use, to have us all read an article about overweight people. I took it personally, but it didn't make anything of it. We also had some heavier historical reading, like something about the Armenian genocide during World War I, and Voltaire's poem Sur le désastre de Lisbonne, which was about the, in Lisbon in the middle of the 18th century, 1755, they had an earthquake and a tsunami that killed upwards of 100,000 people. And then another category, so those are categories. Then we had things that there were readings that I couldn't classify. Things like a rundown, a listing of the powers of the President of France, a list of faux amis. Those are words that you make a mistake that you misunderstand if you're not a native speaker. A word like assister, which doesn't mean to assist somebody or to help somebody, but means something quite different. I consider myself an expert in the misuse of faux amis. I try to speak in French. And then there were lists of political pearls of wisdom. This is a whole article about pearls of wisdom, like Jacques Chirac's comment, "Il n'y a que les imbéciles qui ne changent pas d'avis, je l'ai toujours dit," which roughly translates as I've always said, only idiots never change their mind. It's a little bit of subtlety in the humor, but it's true. Anyway.
Brigitte Bardot said it before Chirac.
What?
Brigitte Bardot said that before Chirac.
Brigitte Bardot.
Brigitte Bardot l'a dit?
Long before
C'est
Chirac.
intéressant.
Yeah.
And then finally, among the group, there was poetry. We read Victor Hugo, Baudelaire, Jacques Prévert, and all the French poets, many French poets, not all of them, that would be impossible. Also French versions of English language poems like Invictus and Edgar Allan Poe's, let me try the nom en français. Jadis, il y a de cela de nombreuses années, vivait au royaume de la mer une jeune fille dont sûrement vous vous souvenez, qui se nommait Annabelle Lee. Now, it's one thing to write a poem, it's another thing to translate a poem and to catch the rhythm of it. Gilbert has made a point of this several times. But Paul could found something that was of excellence, like that poem. And You know, he did that week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out. I know he did it for 4 years to my knowledge, and I think Janine knows that he did that for 7 ans, for 7 years. Only Manon knows if it goes all the way back 30.
Le ciel est bleu, tout est joyeux, c'est le printemps, c'est la fête. Si l'on est deux amoureux, je connais une guinguette. Viens au bal de l'amour, profitons des beaux jours. Les beaux jours ici-bas s'en vont sans retour. Si tu veux le bonheur, laisse bercer ton cœur au son d'une valse, il n'est rien de meilleur.
Okay, well, thank you again, all of you for coming. Something I've heard these last few weeks, especially from cousins in France, was how sorry they were that they didn't really get to know my dad, or that they got to know him so late and didn't get to know like what an interesting man he was. And I think if they could be here and meet all you, they would really get a much better understanding of just how interesting he was. He was really great group of people. Thank you so much for coming. But hearing them say this, that they didn't really know him, got me thinking about how you don't really know anybody, including your own father. It can be a journey just to get to know yourself, forget about knowing someone else. But we know a lot about him, and something he had posted on next to his desk was a quote attributed to Jack London, and he kept it for many, many years, and I'd like to read it for you. I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me a magnificent glow, than a sleepy, permanent planet. The function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use them. And this credo that he adopted certainly explains how active he was, even to the very end. He was always out. And I think it explains his inability to suffer the company of fools. If you said something or did something stupid, he was not going to just sit there and let it go. I'm sure everybody here has a story about that. No matter how polite the company or the situation, he would let you all know that he disagreed. It also explains, I would say, the difficulty he had just waiting. He was terrible at waiting for things. He wanted everything to be moving. And I remember one story, or one time we were traveling in Thailand, and at this point I considered myself to be a pretty hardened traveler, but even so I was having some trouble keeping up with him. And it was, of course, Thailand's being hot. We're walking around this town and I see a place that has a foot massage, and being Thailand, you walk around the corner, there's another place that has a foot massage. And we finally walk by a place that's got air conditioning, blasting, and a beautiful waterfall, and a big foot massage. And say, hey, Papa, I've got an idea. And when he heard it, his only question was, how much time is it going to take? And normally I would go in for a foot massage because my feet were always hurting, and they had a nice body massage too, but that takes 2 hours, and I knew that would be too much for him, so I said 1 hour. And he didn't want to do it. That was too much time. You have 2 feet, that's only 30 minutes per foot. He was happy he did. Still, this credo we have helps explain it, but I still don't get it. And how he can be that driven to keep moving. But he really did take that seriously. And, you know, the flip side of that are the sleepy planet. I know most people are really like him that much. But I know he loved his friends. And that's what he was moving to. He wasn't moving through empty space. He was moving there to be with you all. And it's not that he was so enthralled with the subjects that he was bringing or playing pong or any of that. that stuff. It was really being with you all that he really enjoyed. That's really what he was all about, was being with you. And I would like to think that those things that he loved in you, he brought back to me, and vice versa. And in that way, by getting out, we all sort of carry on and on that way. And with that in mind, I'm going to sing a little song, and then I guess we can start eating. Okay, so this is a song called Live Forever. This is by Billy Joe Shaver. Anybody wants to sing along? Cross that river, I'm gonna catch tomorrow night. I'm gonna wanna hold you, just like I always told you. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Nobody here will ever find me, but I will always be around. Just like the dreams I left behind me, I'm gonna live forever now. You mothers and you fathers, be good to one another. Be sure to raise your children right. Don't let the darkness take them. Don't make them feel forsaken. Just lead them gently to the light. When this old world is blown asunder, and all the stars fall from the sky, remember someone really loves you. We'll live forever, you and I. We're gonna live forever. We're gonna cross that river. We're gonna catch tomorrow night. We're gonna catch tomorrow night. The guest book got here a little late, so everybody didn't sign it. Don't forget. Also, Paul is survived by one sister. She just lost her last brother. She lives in France, so of course couldn't be here. But we have a video camera here. Anybody who has some skills in French would like to say something to her, that would be really great. Thank you all.
By the way, does anybody know the song? Can anybody sing?
avons beaucoup aimé. C'était vraiment non seulement un homme qui savait tout faire, mais c'était réellement un intellectuel. On pouvait parler de tout avec lui. Il était très intéressé et très intéressant. Il parlait de tout. On pouvait parler de tous les livres, les publications, absolument tout. Il savait tout. Comme mon mari et moi, nous aimons beaucoup de la musique classique. Nous parlions beaucoup de la musique classique. Mais enfin, nous parlions de tout, absolument de tout. C'était vraiment un homme qui est devenu un Américain et les Américains devraient être très fiers d'avoir Paul comme un citoyen américain et naturellement également un citoyen français. Et ses enfants, il ne parlait que de ses enfants, de sa femme. Il a eu une bonne vie. Et la chienne, ils ont une chienne également maintenant. Alors, je crois qu'il a été un homme très heureux. J'espère un jour faire votre connaissance quand vous allez venir nous voir ici à San Diego. OK? Avec plaisir.
Cher Paul, je vous remercie du fond du cœur pour m'avoir laissé une impression tellement forte dans ma vie par votre capacité incroyable. Je ne vous ai pas connu assez longtemps, je vous ai connu que très peu de temps, 10 mois seulement. Vous êtes un homme formidable, un professeur irrésistible. Au fait, vous êtes irremplaçable. Personne ne pourra vous remplacer dans notre classe, malheureusement. Nous n'allons jamais vous oublier. Je suis sûre que votre femme, Anne, et vos 2 fils pensent la même chose. Merci 1000 fois, merci Paul. Je suis une étudiante dévouée à vous pour toujours. Huguette. My name is Huguette, and my son. So I wrote it in English for your mother.
Ah, that's very sweet. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yvonne, bonjour, c'est Bernard à San Diego. Je suis un ami de Paul depuis plus de 25 ans. Je le connais comme ami et comme joueur de pétanque. Et j'ai beaucoup de bonnes choses à dire à propos de lui, mais je me limiterai à peut-être 2 choses qui sont, je crois, très typiques de Paul. D'abord, je crois qu'il a certainement le meilleur caractère de tous les gens que je connais. Il est tellement bon enfant, comme on dit en français. Et je ne l'ai jamais vu en colère, je ne l'ai jamais vu excédé, je ne l'ai jamais vu impoli. Il est toujours d'un tempérament égal, très gentil. C'est une personne très très gentille. L'autre chose que je voudrais dire aussi, c'est qu'il me semble très typique de lui, c'est un petit peu son sens de l'humour, mais aussi le fait qu'il ne prenait jamais rien trop au sérieux, y compris lui-même. Je me souviens la première fois que j'ai fait sa connaissance, il m'a dit « Oh, je suis Paul Wolf », c'était au cours de pétanque. Et puis tout de suite il ajoute « Mais tu sais, il me dit, je viens seulement pour l'entraînement parce que tu sais, les tournois ça ne m'intéresse pas beaucoup. » Alors il voulait surtout que je ne le confonde pas avec un joueur de pétanque sérieux. Et ce côté de bon enfant de son caractère, ce côté il ne faut pas prendre les choses trop au sérieux. Je crois que c'est typique de Paul et c'est pour ça qu'on l'aime tant. Ok, Yvonne, toutes mes condoléances.
Eh bien, bonjour mon cher Paul, mon vieux copain. Tu vas beaucoup me manquer. J'ai un très bon souvenir de toi. On a sorti ensemble, on a parlé de politique, et puis de notre jeunesse en France. On m'a toujours fait grand plaisir. Tu étais un bon copain. Au revoir mon vieux copain.
apporte-lui l'écho des beaux jours. Dans le soir en émoi, va lui chanter pour moi la chanson de mon rêve. Guitare d'amour, pour être heureux le temps est si court. Dis-lui que le printemps ne dure qu'un instant et malgré nous s'achève. Dis-lui qu'il faut savoir laisser surprendre son corps par le frisson d'un doux et tendre bonheur. Du sort joyeux il faut comprendre l'appel charmeur. Guitare d'amour, dans le déclin doré d'un beau jour, à son cœur en émoi, va fredonner pour moi la chanson de mon rêve. Chante, dans la forêt l'oiseau t'écoute frileux. Chante, le vagabond suspend sa route joyeux. Chante, la lune rit dans la nuit brune et le vent siffle sur la dune.